Germany has voted, and it is the end of the road for Chancellor Olaf Scholz. He'll most likely be replaced by this man, Friedrich Merz.
The Conservatives are celebrating in Germany tonight after exit polls put them on course for victory. Friedrich Merz is the man expected to be the next Chancellor.
Germany has just held an election, but this is no ordinary election. The shadow of the Ukraine-Russia war, Donald Trump's pressure on Europe and economic tensions with China, all pushing Berlin to the centre of the global chessboard. Now Germany must reshape its European defence, its arms aid to Ukraine, its stance towards Russia, and its trade with China. All this, not to mention domestic economic difficulties, coalition tensions, and pressure from rising far-right parties. In this context, it remains to be seen how Germany will fare as both Europe's leading country and a global actor. So what does Friedrich Merz, the winner of the election, stand for in this ring of fire? Will he open the door to victory for Ukraine, or will he seek a compromise with Putin? And how will this election affect Europe's security architecture? Friedrich Merz, the leader of the Christian Democrats who came first in the German elections, shed some light on these questions. Mr. Merz's statements were mostly about the Ukraine-Russia war.
Gucken Sie sich die Bilder an, Frau Weidel. Und schauen Sie sich die Menschen in der Ukraine an. Sie haben hier gerade einen sehr verräterischen Satz gesagt. Wir würden von Russland nicht mehr als neutral wahrgenommen. Nein, Frau Weidel, wir sind nicht neutral.
Mr. Merz's statements give the strongest signals of victory for Ukraine and emphasize that Vladimir Putin's ambitions are over. So how can the new German leader influence the war in Ukraine? What do the German election results mean for the US and the EU? For answers to these questions and more, our video begins. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and give us a like to stay up to date with our content. The Ukraine-Russia war was one of the most critical chapters in Germany's foreign policy. Germany is one of the most important supporters of Ukraine in Europe and has provided over 11 billion euros in military aid since Russia's full-scale invasion began nearly 3 years ago. This is more than any other European country. Germany is second only to the United States in its support for Ukraine. However, this attitude has led to divergent views within Germany. In particular, the rise in energy prices and the deepening economic difficulties have led to debates about how the aid to Ukraine should continue. Now it is time to put an end to these debates. Mr. Merz said that, "We are not neutral, we are not standing in the middle, we are on the side of Ukraine." Following these words, Mr. Merz said that military support for Ukraine would continue and that he would support Ukraine's full territorial integrity against Russia. In particular, it is known that long-range Taurus missiles will be delivered to Ukraine. Merz criticized Scholz's hesitation, calling it a one-handed fight for Ukraine. It is already known that Ukraine has long wanted these missiles. The Taurus Kyiv PD-350 is a German-Swedish cruise missile fired from fighter jets with a maximum range of 500 kilometers. It can travel at a maximum speed of around 170 kilometers per hour and at a height of only 35 meters. This makes it very difficult for radar systems to detect. The Taurus missile will penetrate behind enemy lines more than any long-range Western missile in Ukraine's arsenal, increasing Ukraine's ability to deter Russian aggression and respond effectively to multiple threats. This will give Ukraine a significant advantage in precision targeting and operational flexibility. At first glance, Taurus and Storm Shadow look very similar. They have approximately the same weight and length and approximately the same size warhead. What sets Taurus apart is, first, its much greater firing range of 500 kilometers. Second, it has a Mephisto smart warhead system that combines the ability to defeat hard and deeply buried targets with the ability to explode and fragment to destroy high-value point and area targets. Germany has reportedly ordered 600 Taurus missiles. These missiles are enough to have a significant impact against Russian aggression and prevent attacks on Ukrainian cities. If the Taurus threat prompts Russia to move all of its military assets deeper, beyond the strike range of Germany's missiles, it will still severely impact Russia's combat effectiveness in its attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure. The Taurus missile would force the Kremlin to take greater risks in airstrikes, and aviation is a priceless asset that it cannot afford to lose. So German leader Merz could provide Ukraine with the key to victory. How will Merz deal with Russian leader Vladimir Putin? He will certainly have a tougher approach than Scholz. Scholz always kept in mind that he wanted to be a careful supporter of Ukraine, but he did not want to provoke Putin. Scholz did not want to cross red lines. There was probably a lot more Scholz could have done. We can expect Merz to do more of these few percentages against Ukraine. The typical conservative West German approach to Russia is tough, and this is where Merz comes from. So who is Friedrich Merz, the man who shook the geopolitical balance? Friedrich Merz is a former lawyer who admires the United States. However, as an ardent defender of Europe and NATO, Merz may find himself at odds with President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Merz is facing increasing pressure on his right. The Alternative for Germany, AfD, a far-right party with anti-immigration and pro-Russian views, has come in second place among voters' growing concerns about immigration and the economy. It was the best performance ever for the party, but it will probably not take part in a government coalition. Other leading parties have refused to partner with the AfD because they consider it too extreme. This means that Merz will have to weave a potentially fragile government coalition, partly together with the current ruling centre-left Social Democrats, who took third place. So how can Merz keep the AfD at bay? According to Gordon Rapinski, Germany's editor-in-chief and one of the most knowledgeable observers of the country's politics, Merz has to keep the AfD in check. Important figures in the United States may not support him. Tech giant Elon Musk, a close associate of Trump, has been an outspoken supporter of the AfD, and Vice President J.D. Vance recently met with its leader. Trump, for his part, seemed to take solace in the fact that Merz's winning alliance was conservative, writing on social media, "Sia, this is a great day for Germany." But Merz announced a potentially decisive decision on Trump and put Europe's 80-year alliance with the US in the past. Merz said that the Trump administration does not care about Europe and is allying with Russia. The new leader warned that the continent urgently needs to strengthen its defences and potentially even find a replacement for NATO. Merz's remarks mark a historic turning point. They reveal how deeply Trump has shaken the political foundations of Europe, which has been dependent on American security guarantees since 1945. If Merz continues his rhetoric after the formation of a new government in the coming weeks, he will steer Europe in a radical new direction at a critical time for the security of Ukraine and the wider region. On the other hand, Merz will take Germany in a different direction from that of the current Chancellor Olaf Scholz. By 2021, it may not even resemble the Germany that Angela Merkel, also of the CDU, has led for 16 years. Last month, Merz, with the support of the far-right Alternative for Germany party, pressed the German parliament for new immigration measures. This was a clear departure from Merkel's Wir schaffen das pledge to accept refugees. Friedrich Merz is the opposite of Angela Merkel in terms of rhetoric and approach to politics. They have a very special relationship. Friedrich was on the rise in the Conservative Party in the 90s and, in parallel with Angela Merkel's rise, he was in a powerful position as the chairman of the CDU-CSU parliamentary group in the early 2000s. At one point, Angela Merkel fired Friedrich Merz from his position as group leader. Merz, in a very angry state, quit politics and followed Angela Merkel's chancellorship from the sidelines. He was very critical of her actions. When he ran for the party leadership after Angela Merkel resigned, he advocated the opposite approach to politics to Angela Merkel. This means a more traditional conservative approach, whereas Merkel was really integrated in the middle, very understanding of her political opponents. Merkel was a politician who was not arrogant, who did not look for unnecessary fights, whereas Friedrich Merz is one of those people who likes to fight, who likes to make sharp speeches, but who also says things that may not be useful for him in the long run. Olaf Scholz, like Angela Merkel, is not a very charismatic person. He is someone who always tries to integrate into the other political party. In that respect, they were quite similar. The difference was that Angela Merkel was humble in her approach and in her non-charismatic appearance, and Olaf Scholz was rather arrogant in his non-charismatic appearance. In short, after 2 decades of very timid and very defensive communication, which we saw with Angela Merkel and Olaf Scholz, we are going to witness a big change in terms of political communication. In conclusion, why did Merz's party outperform Scholz's party? What were the main ideological and personal factors behind this? The Conservative Party is structurally a little bit stronger than the Social Democratic Party in Germany. If you look at history, most of the years have been with Conservative chancellors, and at very specific times, or with very specific candidates, you had a Social Democratic majority. So there is a structural advantage for the Conservative Party among the population. But Olaf Scholz also had a very difficult time in government. He was working in a complex coalition with 2 partners, so 3 partners in total, and very different policy approaches. The energy crisis hit Germany very hard, because gas prices were going up so much, and Germany was obviously very dependent on Russian gas. Germany saw a lot of inflation and economic turmoil. This obviously resulted in the population losing confidence in the government and also in the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. We think there is a shift in the political debate in Germany towards harder immigration. All these things that you see in the US, we are seeing in Germany. In this context, Friedrich Merz is a candidate who can also satisfy these aspirations or tendencies of the population. Germany has seen many attacks by migrants in the last 12 months, and the population really wants change. What does a Merz-led Germany mean for the EU? 2 days before the election, Merz issued a stern warning that Europe must be ready to defend itself without the US. Merz has promised big, sweeping policies to grow Germany's defence industry and is expected to quickly fulfil his predecessor's promise to lift the ban on sending long-range Taurus cruise missiles to Ukraine for attacks on Russian targets. A key theme of his first weeks as Chancellor will be to explain how Berlin will raise the money to expand the $100 billion fund agreed by the Scholz government for the renewal of Bundeswehr equipment and facilities. This cash has been earmarked and will be spent on large-scale procurement programs until 2027, raising questions about how Berlin plans to meet its obligations to NATO from the traditional national budget. German energy policy in recent years has focused on accelerating investment in renewable energy, shutting down nuclear reactors, and outsourcing gas imported from Russia. Merz's CDU has similarly vowed to use renewable energy in perpetuity. But his political family, the centre-right European People's Party, also opposes the EU's green energy goals. Merz, meanwhile, has taken a warmer stance on nuclear power than Scholz, who is challenging a long-standing German taboo around atomic energy. While the country is unlikely to revive its closed reactors, a more tolerant nuclear stance from Berlin could help pro-nuclear countries persuade Brussels to treat atomic energy like renewables. Merz also said he wants to repeal Germany's hard-fought Building Energy Act, which aims to speed up the rollout of clean heating practices, a message to green skeptics across Europe. A Merz-led government would place less emphasis on climate change than Scholz's coalition. In his election campaign, Merz raised concerns about the impact of climate policy on business, vowed to put economic growth above all other concerns and called for the rollback of several EU green regulations. But in government, green advocates say they are counting on Merz's rhetorical hammer turning into a feather duster. Industry, in general, wants less bureaucracy, but it also wants coherent policy. Industrial incentives can be used to help companies become greener and more efficient. Merz, like Scholz, wants to delay key corporate sustainability reporting rules to revive Germany's ailing sector. This means that Germany under Merz is almost certain to support a strong simplification bill for green rules. The European Commission is expected to publish this proposal on February 26th. Merz's victory also means that the centre-right European People's Party, the political family of Merz that dominates the European Parliament, once again has a strong ally in the EU's largest economy. The EPP has worked hard to water down the EU anti-deforestation rule with the support of groups further to the right. Merz inherits an economy in recession, dragged down further by a crisis engulfing the automotive sector. He is aware of the problems: high energy and labour costs, and stiff competition in the electric vehicle transition. But he has been short on details on how he plans to help automakers. In his election speeches, he promised to cut red tape and reduce high costs, but he stopped short of backing reform of Germany's debt brake. This would tie Merz's hands when it comes to financing such initiatives. Germany's car makers are highly dependent on the Chinese market. This has led Scholz to bend to Beijing's wishes, for example, by lobbying against Chinese EV taxes. Merz will take a tougher line against China and has made it clear to car makers that they should not come crawling to him if Asian investments boom. Merz, who wants to take a stronger stance against Russia and China and rekindle old friendships with EU leaders, has a lot of work ahead of him if he wants to connect the German export economy to global growth centres like the Mercosur countries, Mexico, or Southeast Asia. Merz recognises that a functional Franco-German axis could create more trade agreements, more certainty for companies, and a stronger Europe. The Christian Democrat has also signalled a tougher approach towards China, or at least he acknowledged that the German economy is too dependent on Beijing's inconveniences and demands. How hawkish Merz's approach to trade will be, however, will depend on who he ends up with as a coalition partner. The victory of Merz's Christian Democratic Union, CDU, means that Berlin will be allied on agricultural policy both with the largest political bloc in the European Parliament, the European People's Party, led by Bavarian State Councillor Manfred Weber, and with EU Agriculture Commissioner Christopher Hansen. Ahead of negotiations on the future of the EU's common agricultural policy, Hansen has launched a farm policy overhaul that would effectively roll back the green agenda of recent times and instead emphasise making farming a more attractive and economically viable profession. Merz's CDU said in its campaign platform that it wanted a cap that serves farmers. Scholz's centre-left government has made initiatives to support organic farming and reduce food waste, but it clashed with farmers over its decision a year ago to remove tax breaks on agricultural diesel. The CDU said it would reinstate the diesel tax break and take broader steps to strengthen planning security for farmers. The party said that, with the CDU, no farmer will ever again have to protest with his tractor in front of the Brandenburg Gate. Merz's chancellorship will mean that the conservative opposition will again be involved in Germany's famous debt brake. The brake limits the government's annual deficit spending to 0.35% and is seen by many as the reason for the poor state of the country's infrastructure. Scholz's efforts to intervene in the brake led to the collapse of his government, and Merz's CDU faction is strongly opposed to any reforms. Surprisingly, Merz himself hinted in a television debate earlier this month that he is open to some tweaks, but not before other solutions have been tried. Otherwise, financial markets are generally sceptical that Merz can do much to halt Germany's well-documented economic decline, with gross domestic product expected to contract by 0.5% in 2025. During the race, the choice between the two parties' economic policies was ultimately superficial. ING global head of macro Carsten Brzezinski lamented in a note earlier this month, noting that Merz's plans for tax and spending cuts reflected an almost spiritual faith in free markets. Merz will also have a critical influence on the outcome of a major transnational banking war that could test EU ideals. When Milanese lender UniCredit made a surprise bid for Germany's Commerzbank last year, it looked exactly the kind of cross-border banking consolidation Mario Draghi advocated in his seminal report, until Scholz's government reacted with horror and devised crazy plans to prevent it. UniCredit CEO Andrea Orcel has since said he would wait for Merz's position before making another move, but it is hard to imagine that the new leader would be more willing to give up one of the country's most valuable lenders. Merz holds the keys to significantly boosting Europe's defence capabilities in the coming years. As Trump pressures Europe to increase military spending, many in Brussels are anxiously awaiting Germany's approval for the European Commission to borrow money on behalf of member states. Over-indebted countries such as France, Italy and Spain, which have failed to meet NATO's defence spending target, argue that getting free money from Brussels is the only way to dramatically increase military spending without making politically unpopular cuts in other budget areas. Merz warmed to the idea during the election campaign, and his supporters hope his backing will overcome opposition from frugal allies like Austria and the Netherlands. There are many less controversial ideas on the table, such as exempting defence from EU spending rules or increasing military funding in the EU's new multi-annual budget, which comes into force in 2028. But supporters of the common debt argue that none of these alone would be enough to meet the scale of the challenge. As a result, Germany went to the polls amid multi-layered and strategically important developments in foreign policy. Dynamics such as the Ukraine-Russia war, the Trump administration's pressures on Europe and Germany, economic relations with China, and European security will be the main factors determining Berlin's roadmap after the elections. Germany's decisions in this process will be decisive not only at the national level, but also for the future of Europe and the global system. Therefore, the results of the elections are of great importance, not only for Germany's domestic politics, but also for international relations. Thank you for following us.